Hey everyone, it's Joachim Comic Center, and it's that time of the month again, or not really, because I try to make these videos in the beginning of each month, but whichever day it is and whichever time it is, it's time to wrap up my reads for June 2021. Okay, so the first book I'm gonna go through is the book that I showed you last time, that I told you that I was reading, and I finished it off the very next day, of course, that I was recording that video. That is the Gail Simone Batgirl Omnibus, or the Batgirl Returns Omnibus, which is an accurate title in itself, I guess, because it's the return of Barbara Gordon into the role of Batgirl. This is one of the first comic books that got me introduced into American comic books when I was first starting off with a pull list at my local comic shop. It was Scott Snyder's Batman. I just jumped in at 0 year when that started off, and Batgirl, where that started off with issue number 20 or 21 with the new ventriloquist character. I just wanted to have the whole thing, of course, so eventually I scavenged after the standard size hardcovers, and then later on, as it came to be, the omnibus was finally announced, so I upgraded to this, and having reread it, it is still amazing in my opinion. Gail Simone does nothing wrong with how she expresses the character. I love the drama she brings into Barbara's life, reintroducing her brother, James Gordon Jr., everything about that. I think Batgirl had some of the best death of let's see here, I always mix these two up. The death of the family tie-ins, I always think she had some of the best issues for that really didn't bother her story in every way. You can see the cover here by Adam Hughes, but I am much more in favor to what's on the hardcover itself, which is by Alex Garner. And yeah, this is not really an overview of the book per se, and I don't really want to spoil too many things. I enjoyed this very much. Like I said, reintroduction of her brother, James Gordon Jr., which I first saw appear in the Detective Comics issues that collected the whole Scott Snyder Black Mirror story arc, when Dick Grayson was still handling the mantle of the Bat. It was a good solid read. It's about 35 or so issues of the main run, and then there's some one-shots put in there, like from Future's End, for example, which actually wraps up the whole book, which I still think is fine, actually, for her story that it is. And it's a good jump in and then jump out type kind of book, I would say, after having read it. If you're curious about any of the Batgirls and you're curious about Barbara in particular, I would say that this is the book for you. Then we go to the next one. And next on the pile is the Superman Omnibus by Peter J. Tomasi and Patrick Gleason. This is of course the same team that were running the Batman and Robin series during the New 52. Yet another family-oriented title, because Batman and Damian. And now we have Clark and John. Of course, Lois Lane is also within the picture. But I mean, and that is, she should have been included within the cover itself, I think, because the whole family aspect of it. But I guess they tried to match it with the previous cover that was with Batman and Damian. This is nothing else but a superhero comic as well as a family story. I really enjoyed it. At first, when I picked up the oversized deluxe hardcovers from the Rebirth era, and I also picked up the Action Comics deluxe editions and read these kind of back and forth. In the beginning, I was thinking that might confused me a bit, so I didn't know which issues actually came from which, because it all mended together pretty well, I was thinking. The Action Comics title was more self-sustained on Superman himself and not as family-oriented, whilst this is very focused on the whole family aspect of it. Lois is a bigger part within this run, I would say. Yeah, it's just the writing itself also. It humanizes Superman in a way that he always appears more human when written right, I guess, because he's brought up with our values so far and so forth. Yeah, because this is also the reintroduction into the classic, let's see here, post Crisis on Infinite Earth Superman. The fate of the New 52 Superman is sort of explained in the beginning so that you actually can jump into this like a new reader. And if you would dig into anything that happened before this, you would probably be more confused. And I myself never read much of the New 52 titles when it came to Superman. I read the Grant Morrison work on Action Comics. Didn't think it was the strongest work, so I never picked up that omnibus. But this is outstanding, I would say. This also keeps some crossover issues between the Super Sons era, and I would think that it's Action Comics that collects this whole, and also Teen Titans is involved within that crossover. So I already read that crossover once when I reread the Super Sons Expanded Edition, but I happily read it again just to get the whole feeling of the whole story that takes place here. I think it also has one crossover, that is the Superman Returns crossover. I think that is what they titled it, but it still works out within the issues that is collected within this book. So there's no companion book needed. It is a solid read by itself. And if you're interested within Superman in the modern era, I would happily recommend this book if you have the money for it. And the next two books are not comic books, or they're comic books, they're manga books. Manga means comic. So we have the Fullmetal Edition volumes 12 and 13. And this is my little brother's favorite manga, and I do believe he thinks that the anime series is one of the best out there. And I am really starting to get why 12 and 13 volumes in. But no, really, I've enjoyed the ride so far, but now I'm getting more and more sucked into the story and what is actually going to happen here with the two Elric brothers, as well as other family members involved. It's about this world where the rule of alchemy is applied, so the rule of equivalent exchange. It's all started off with them trying to bring back their mother from death, basically, and so they had to make the greatest sacrifice. One of the brothers lost an arm and a leg, and the other one lost his whole body. So there's high stakes in this world, and you just can't do as you wish, because there is going to be an exchange for something that you wish for. Now they just try to mend their mistake and just trying to get back their bodies, as well as we discovered different types of alchemy within these storylines and all these different colorized characters. I'm actually really starting to love this, and they are collected in such beautiful small hardcover editions that I'm very happy to keep when this story wraps up. Hey buddy. Okay, so after I took that small break of reading American comic books, having just finished off all my Superman books, finally, with that Superman Omnibus also, well, not finally, but I do like to get into the next thing. And the next thing that would scratch most of my unread books and omnibus off my list would be to start a new marathon. And that reading marathon is surrounded around my favorite DC character, and that is a Batman marathon. So, of course, I started from the beginning, where you should and could. And that is the Batman Year 1 Deluxe Edition. Collecting all the 4 issues that Frank Miller wrote to revamp the Dark Knight himself. I guess you really revamped him with The Dark Knight Returns, but this is his new origin, at least, or a modern take on his origin, so I'll take it. And I've read this so many times, and I can't think of in how many formats. I think I owned the paperback before I owned this. And The Dark Knight Returns I've definitely owned in more editions. Yeah, I had the leather-bound book as well. I read it in that one, yeah. This one is always a great read for me, and ever since DC made the animated movie of Year 1, I've always read these Frank Miller books better, because now I know the tone and the pace of the wording much better than when I read it myself for the first time. It's just a very fluent and solid read. The first time I read The Dark Knight Returns, actually, it took me so long, and I thought the issues were like the longest issues ever, and they are pretty long. I think they're almost 50 pages each issue in that series. But now I don't feel that way at all. Now it's like a 1 hour read, or maybe less. But doesn't matter. Batman Year 1, fantastic story, and if you're interested in within the origins of the Dark Knight, this is your book. You're just gonna lay there, aren't you? Sorry. And after having read the origin of Batman, I just went into some of the earlier classics that I had collected. And one of which is Batman the Killing Joke by Alan Moore and drawn by Brian Boland. I have not reread this ever since I got it, I think. I think I pushed my father into reading this just to show him that, okay, you might think that these are just jokey haha books, but I want to show you something that's dark. And I think he got it, but then I think he misunderstood that there was like a epilogue type of series where there's just this random dude that shoots and kills Batman in the end. It's nothing in particular that I was caring about, because I was just caring about the main story collected within this one. But I think when I lent this to my father, he got a bit confused by that part, how that was connected to the Killing Joke story itself. And I was like, no, it's just this part that you should care about. And I don't even think I reread that part in this one, because why would I? I want the Killing Joke, just as that. And of course this is recolored and everything, but I never experienced the original coloring in the first place, so it doesn't bother me personally. And the story, I really like it. I want to believe that Alan Moore wrote one of the last Batman stories out there without anyone knowing. That is a theory that Grant Morrison brought up on a podcast episode of Fatman on Batman. And I can really see that in some matter of form, that this in some ways could be the last Batman story, if he were to go too far. And speaking of Grant Morrison, after I finished off The Killing Joke, I went straight into this Asylum. And Arkham Asylum, a series house on Series Earth, written by Grant Morrison and illustrated by Dave McKean. And if you haven't checked out Dave McKean's artwork before, it is very, I would say, experimental. It's photography mended with some type of Photoshop and paintings, sketches. It's all over the place, and it makes for a very eerie tone that I think fits perfectly with this type of story. This is also the story that inspired the first Batman Arkham Asylum game, and I can really see that with how the villains take in Batman into the lair, and they have taken over the asylum, and he has to wander around and just survive for 1 hour for them to release the hostages that they got. more and more so they try to convince Batman, I would say, that when the majority of insanity is within one place over the so-called mentally sane, the majority in there is right in their perspective of the world. And that's me overthinking stuff again. I like what he did with this. This is my second or third reread of this book within this collected edition. I really like it. It's due for yet another reread in the future, I would say, for further analogy. And then last, but definitely not least, we have the Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale Batman Omnibus. This collects the stories that is the Haunted Night, the Long Halloween, and Dark Victory, as well as Catwoman When in Rome. I've read these stories collected within paperback editions, then first time I got this omnibus, now I reread it again. So for a third time, and it is still as strong as the first time when I read all of this material. It's a heavy book, so I'll just lay it here on display and probably show you some panel works or something. This book is more surrounded around the non-super villain, I would say, because it's a true detective story, and there are very few true detective stories and mysteries within the runs of Batman, I would say, because most of the time we know who the villain is already, just because of the super villain aspect of it. But in this one, we get featured the gangster and mobster side of Gotham, and it's still in the early days of Batman. I would say that he's been Batman for maybe 1 or 2 years within these stories, because it's before Robin enters into the picture. Yeah, just because it is so early in his career, and this is before all the gangsters and mobsters go out of the picture for one reason or another, and then the supervillains takes over, and that's where we get all the predictability. It's that, can you even use that as a word? I mean, you can predict pretty much who's the villain all the time, it's because they each have their own themed weapon and so forth and method. But with the gangsters, the mobsters, the Carmines and the Maronis, we have just regular people, regular killing methods, I guess. And it's a true detective story. I've said that enough now. And it's centered around, it starts off in Halloween, basically. And then by each holiday that follows, there is a killing one after the other. And so is the killer brought forth with the name Holiday, simply because every holiday there is another victim, and this goes on for a whole year before the first story wraps up. And I shouldn't forget the stories in the beginning of the book, that is Haunted Nights, and it's sort of an anthology story and a rewritten version of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, and sort of takes place around Halloween rather than Christmas. And then in the very end of the book, it's the Catwoman story collected, that's When in Rome, and it sort of takes place in the middle of Dark Victory, I would say. So it's collected for itself, so they haven't jumbled the issues in any sort of way. But when I read it the first time, I kind of noticed that they referenced to things that was happening during the Dark Victory. And then when I read the Dark Victory, of course, previous to that, she mentioned that she's been away in some way or form. You might, if you want to read it all chronological and linear, you might want to jump back and forth between Dark Victory and When in Rome, if you would read it yourself. I myself didn't, but I think it worked out fine anyways. And it is one of the best works of Jeff Loeb. Definitely. The Tim Sale artwork, I would say, it's not my usual take of what I like with artwork in comic books, I'm usually drawn to things like Jason Fabok, Jim Lee, and Ivan Reyes artwork. I mean, clean cut line work and everything. But Tim Sale has this simplified, dare I say, minimalistic style for his characters. There's very big black spots. I mean, sort of like Eduardo Rizzo draws his stuff, but I think Tim Sale is way ahead there. I just like it. Great depth within his artwork, and still there's a simplicity to it. And the artwork itself make it look like a classic Batman run. And so, with that is all the books that I've read in the month of June. And I'm really hoping that I can get more books read this month, but keeping on with the Batman Marathon and whatever books that I might sneak in there. I'm currently reading The Batman Road to No Man's Land. I have the paperbacks ready to go whenever I finish that book off, and we'll see where we go from there. If anyone is a Batman fan and has collected those, you know there's a lot of stuff out there. And I'm still trying to go through it and see what is truly essential for The Dark Knight. And I would like to thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you liked it, hope you enjoyed, hope you found some value in me talking about these titles. And I just want to thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in another video. So thank you. Bye bye.